The sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, its dying lights spilling over the dusty ribbon of road that wound toward the Lone Star gas station. The station stood like a relic of forgotten days, its neon sign buzzing fitfully against the vast, desolate prairie, with a wind keen through brittle grass like a widow's lament. Into this mournful twilight stepped Eleanor Brooks, a black woman whose presence bore the weight of unseen battles. Her cotton dress, faded and torn at the hem, fluttered in the breeze, and her rubber sandals, worn thin, slapped the cracked earth with a cadence of quiet rebellion. She carried an old backpack, its straps frayed and patched, clinging to her shoulders as though it held the last fragments of a life she refused to surrender. No one at Lone Star could have suspected that Eleanor was no mere wanderer. She was a storm cloaked in stillness, a thread of justice woven into the tapestry of prejudice, her every movement an echo of a truth buried deep beneath the plains. Who was she? A lost soul adrift in the gathering dusk, or a spirit summoned from the shadows of history to demand her due? The wind knew her tale, its mournful howl a prelude to a reckoning that would blaze across the night like wildfire through dry timber. Inside the station, the air hung heavy with the acrid bite of gasoline and the weight of stagnation. Travis Coleman, a white man of 30 with a mop of unkempt brown hair and eyes sharp as frostbitten steel, slouched behind the counter, his scarred hands idly turning the pages of a tattered newspaper. Travis was no ordinary clerk. He was the sovereign of this crumbling outpost, a lord in a realm of rust and oil, where he ruled with the unyielding certainty of a man who'd never doubted his dominion. When Eleanor nudged the creaking door open, the bell's jangle pierced the silence like a gunshot, and Travis's gaze snapped up, raking over her with the cold precision of a hunter assessing prey. He didn't see a woman with a purpose. He saw a trespasser, a black figure in ragged clothes, an insult to the brittle order he'd sworn to maintain with his unspoken creed of exclusion. "We don't serve your kind here," he growled, his voice rough as the gravel strewn outside, his eyes flicking back to the paper with deliberate indifference. Eleanor halted, a faint tremor rippling through her frame, but her head remained unbowed, her dignity a shield against his scorn. "I just need some gas," she said, her tone soft yet firm, a whisper of strength in a place starved of it. She eased her backpack to the floor, rummaging inside to produce a fistful of crumpled bills and a worn credit card, letting them slip from her grasp in a calculated fumble that masked her intent. "I've got money." Travis's laugh was a jagged blade, slicing through the stale air with cruel mirth. "That won't buy you a scrap of dignity here, let alone gas. Scram before I make you." Eleanor bent to retrieve her coins, her fingers brushing the chipped linoleum with a deliberate slowness that belied the tempest simmering within. Her eyes, shadowed beneath a curtain of resolve, flickered with a fire Travis couldn't discern, his sight obscured by the fortress of prejudice he'd erected around his soul. He saw her, not as a person with a story to tell, but as a nuisance, a black stain on the faded floor of his fiefdom. He didn't hear the wind rising beyond the walls, its mournful tune sharpening into a growl, nor did he feel the storm gathering momentum, poised to sweep through his world with the ferocity of a long-suppressed reckoning. The last rays of daylight bled away, and night unfurled its dark mantle over the plains. Eleanor's voice rose, threaded with a desperation so artfully woven it could have pierced the hardest heart. "Please, my car's stranded miles back. I've got no way home. Just a gallon. I'm begging you." But Travis was stone, his empathy entombed beneath layers of inherited disdain. "Don't try that sob story on me," he snarled, surging from behind the counter with the aggression of a man defending his pride. "People like you, thieves, leeches, I've seen your tricks. Get out now, or I'll haul you out myself." He gave her no chance to reply. His hand clamped onto her arm, a vice forged in entitlement, and he yanked her toward the door with a force that rattled the glass in its frame. The door flew open, and Eleanor stumbled, crashing onto the dusty ground outside, her backpack tumbling free. Its contents spilled across the dirt. A faded photograph of a black woman cradling two children, their smiles a fragile relic of joy. An old police badge, its edges tarnished, but glinting faintly under the station's weak glow. A child's drawing of a house with smoke curling from the chimney, fluttering in the breeze. And a small, cracked locket, spilling open to reveal a lock of gray hair tied with a ribbon. Roy, the black mechanic tinkering with a rusted truck nearby, dropped his wrench and bolted toward her. But Travis's voice thundered through the dusk. "Roy, leave her there. She's not worth your time." Roy froze, his hands hovering, his eyes locking with Eleanor's in a fleeting exchange of anguish and solidarity. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. Eleanor, kneeling in the dust, her dress streaked with grime, murmured back, "Don't be, Roy. This isn't the end." The sky darkened, stars piercing the black veil like shards of ice, and Eleanor remained there, unyielding. The photo quivered in her grasp, the badge a silent testament to lost honor, the locket a fragile bridge to a past she carried like a wound. She was a figure hewn from tragedy, cast down yet unbroken, her stillness a rebuke sharper than any cry. Travis retreated inside, his chest swelling with the hollow triumph of a man who believed he'd purged his realm of an intruder. He didn't hear the echoes swelling from the plains, a chorus of the unseen, rising with the promise of a storm that would rend his illusions asunder. Time crawled forward, an hour slipping by in the station's brittle calm, until the telephone's shrill ring shattered it like glass. Travis answered, his tone thick with swagger. "This is Samuel Holt." The voice on the line roared, deep and unyielding as thunder over the hills. "Owner of the Lone Star chain. I hear you turned away a customer tonight." Travis smirked, unshaken. "Yeah, some ragged woman short on cash. I kept this place respectable." But Samuel's reply was a blade of frost, slicing through the line with lethal precision. "That woman was Eleanor Brooks, county sheriff, the one who took a bullet for me in a holdup 10 years ago. She was testing you, Coleman. You just crossed a line you'll wish you hadn't." The phone slipped from Travis's grip, clattering to the counter with a sound like a breaking spine. His face drained of color, his knees buckling as the weight of his error crashed upon him like a collapsing wall. The door swung open once more, and Eleanor strode in, not as the broken soul he'd expelled, but as a force of justice clad in the dust of her ordeal. Her torn dress hung heavy with grit, but her posture was that of a warrior, her eyes ablaze with a quiet fury that stilled the air. Roy trailed behind, his head high, a witness to the unraveling of a tyrant's reign. Eleanor faced Travis, her voice a clarion call, cutting through the haze. "You judged me by these rags and my skin," she said, each word a chisel against his pride. "But you didn't see me. I'm not here to crush you. I'm here to make you see what you've ignored." Travis fumbled for words, his apologies a tangle of panic, but she raised a hand, her gaze piercing through the veil of time. She spoke of her father, a black laborer beaten senseless at this very station 20 years before, his only since seeking gas for his stranded family on a winter's night. "He fell right there," she said, her voice trembling yet resolute, "because men like you decided he was less than human. They kicked him until he couldn't stand, my mother sobbing as they drove off, my brother and I hiding in the car, too scared to scream. I became sheriff, not for vengeance, but to shield others from that night." Travis's head sank, his arrogance crumbling to dust beneath the weight of her truth. But the tale twisted deeper still. Roy stepped forward, his voice quaking with a courage he'd long suppressed. "I knew your dad," he said, tears brimming as he met Eleanor's gaze. "He gave me his last dime for bread when I was a kid, right out there after they threw him out. I was starving, and he smiled at me, even with blood on his face. I swore I'd never forget." Eleanor's breath hitched, then softened into a smile, a dawn breaking through her storm. She clasped Roy's hand, her grip a lifeline across decades. "Then he's still here," she said, her words a bridge spanning the years. The station held its breath, the wind outside falling to a hush. Travis felt the ground shift, not from fear of punishment, but from the vastness of his own blindness. Eleanor turned to him, her tone gentling yet firm. "I'm giving you a chance, Travis, not because you've earned it, but because I believe even the hardest hearts can change." Time marched on, and fate dealt a new hand. One stormy night, weeks later, lightning tore the sky as a battered truck screeched in a Lone Star, its driver, a white man, staggering out, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead, his voice a ragged plea for help after a crash on the highway. Travis froze, old instincts clawing at him to turn the man away. Too poor, too desperate, too much trouble. But Eleanor's echo rang in his skull, a relentless drumbeat of conscience. He grabbed the first aid kit, his hands trembling as he pressed gauze to the man's wound, shouting for Roy to fetch gas. The man's breathing steadied, and as the rain hammered the roof, he gripped Travis's arm, choking out, "Thank you." Travis nodded, a knot in his chest unraveling, the ghost of his past fading in the storm's roar. But the night held one more twist. As the man was loaded into an ambulance, a young girl, his daughter, climbed from the truck's wreckage, her wide eyes darting to Eleanor, who'd arrived in her sheriff's uniform to oversee the scene. "You're the lady from the picture," the girl whispered, pulling a crumpled photo from her pocket. A snapshot of Eleanor, years younger, bandaging a stranger's arm after that long-ago robbery. "My dad keeps it. He said you saved him." Eleanor knelt, her breath catching as she recognized the man. Samuel Holt's brother, a face from a night she'd never forgotten. "Looks like we're even now," she said, her smile trembling with the weight of memory. Lone Star transformed. Its weathered walls, once a bastion of contempt, became a haven for the lost, where Travis stood one dusk, addressing a growing crowd. Travelers, locals, Eleanor among them, her badge gleaming under the fading sun. "I thought I knew who belonged," he said, his voice raw with a humility forged in fire. "But I was wrong. Wrong about her, wrong about so much. She gave me a chance to make it right, and I won't let it slip." As Eleanor prepared to leave, Travis stopped her, pressing her father's badge into her palm, polished to a mirror's shine, reclaimed from the station's forgotten junk. "I found it," he said, his voice thick, "and I'm sorry for him, for you, for all of it." She took it, her fingers tracing its edges, then nodded, a silent absolution. Later, under a sky ablaze with stars, Roy approached, handing her the child's drawing from her bag, its house now a symbol of renewal. "You dropped this," he said, grinning. She tucked it close, her smile a beacon in the dark. But the story lingered. Months later, a letter arrived at Lone Star, penned by the truck driver's daughter. A thank you note with a drawing of her own. A gas station under a starry sky, 3 figures standing together, Travis, Roy, and Eleanor, their hands linked. Travis pinned it to the wall, beside the badge he'd hung as a quiet vow. Lone Star was no longer a mere stop. It was a lighthouse, where the echoes of the unseen roared into life, where mercy drowned out malice, and where, beneath the boundless night, a legacy of hope rose from the dust, radiant and unbroken.